The Eldon family lived in a modest two-bedroom apartment in Pasadena, California. It was September 1991, and they had no idea that their 4-month-old son, Spencer, was about to become one of the most recognizable babies in the world. Rick Eldon worked as a commercial photographer, which is how he'd gotten connected with Kirk Weddle, the underwater photographer hired to shoot the cover for Nirvana's upcoming album. Kirk needed babies for an underwater shoot, and Rick, always looking for extra money and thinking it might be a fun experience, volunteered Spencer. The shoot took 15 seconds. Spencer was dunked underwater, swam toward a dollar bill on a fishhook, and that was it. Rick was paid $200. He signed a release form, took his check, and went home. He didn't think about it again until 3 months later. It was a Tuesday afternoon in late November when Rick walked into Tower Records on Sunset Boulevard. He wasn't looking for anything in particular, just killing time before picking up Spencer from his mother-in-law's house. He wandered into the new releases section and stopped dead in his tracks. There, displayed on the front rack with at least 50 copies, was his son. Spencer's tiny naked body swimming through blue water, reaching for a dollar bill, his penis clearly visible for anyone walking by to see. The album was called Nevermind by a band Rick had never heard of called Nirvana. Rick bought a copy with shaking hands. He drove home well above the speed limit, his mind racing. When he got there, his wife Janet was feeding Spencer in the kitchen. "Janet," Rick said, his voice tight, "we need to talk." He showed her the album cover. Janet stared at it for a long moment, then she looked at Rick, then back at the album cover, then at Spencer, who was happily gumming a teething ring, completely oblivious to the fact that his image was currently being sold in record stores across America. "Is that?" Janet started. "Yes. That's Spencer. From the underwater shoot in August. His penis is showing." "I know. Everyone can see our baby's penis." "I know." Janet set down Spencer's bottle very carefully, like she was trying not to break something. "Rick, did you know they were going to use this photo like this?" "No, I don't know what I thought. Maybe it would be used in some artsy photography magazine or something, not on an album cover, not like this." They sat in silence for a moment, both staring at the image of their son that was now, apparently, available for purchase at every record store in the country. "What do we do?" Janet asked. Rick didn't have an answer. Over the next few weeks, Nevermind started climbing the charts. By January 1992, it had knocked Michael Jackson's Dangerous out of the #1 spot on the Billboard 200. Suddenly, Spencer Eldon's baby penis wasn't just visible in record stores. It was visible on MTV, in magazine ads, on promotional posters, on T-shirts being sold at concerts. The Eldons started getting phone calls, friends who'd seen the album cover and recognized Spencer, family members who thought it was inappropriate, Rick's mother who was horrified that her grandson's genitals were being displayed publicly, Janet's father who threatened to call a lawyer. Rick did try to call a lawyer, 3 of them, actually. They all said the same thing: he'd signed a release form. Unless he could prove the image was being used in a way that caused direct harm to Spencer, there wasn't much legal recourse. The album kept selling. 1 million copies, 2 million, 5 million. Each sale meant another image of baby Spencer swimming naked through water, reaching for money. By March 1992, Rick had developed an obsession. He needed to meet Kurt Cobain. He needed to talk to the person responsible for this, to make him understand that Spencer wasn't just an image. He was a real child with a real family who hadn't consented to this level of exposure. He started calling Nirvana's management company. He left messages, lots of messages. Most went unreturned. The few times he did get a callback, it was from assistants who offered him more money, assuming this was about compensation. Rick turned it down. This wasn't about money. This was about his son. Then, in April 1992, Rick got a call that surprised him. It was from Kurt Cobain's assistant. Nirvana was playing at the Great Western Forum in Los Angeles in 2 weeks. Kurt had heard about Rick's calls and wanted to meet with him privately before the show. Rick almost said no. Part of him was terrified of what he might do or say if he actually came face to face with Kurt Cobain. But another part of him needed this meeting, needed to look Kurt in the eye and make him see Spencer as a human being, not just an artistic statement. The night of the show, Rick arrived at the Forum at 5 p.m. as instructed. He was escorted backstage to a small dressing room where Kurt Cobain sat on a ratty couch wearing a cardigan and jeans, looking nothing like the rock star Rick had built up in his mind. Kurt stood when Rick entered. He didn't smile. He didn't offer his hand. He just looked at Rick with those ice blue eyes and said, "You're Spencer's dad." "Yeah," Rick said. "I'm Spencer's dad." "Sit down," Kurt said, gesturing to a chair across from the couch. Rick sat. For a moment, neither of them said anything. "I'm guessing you're here because you're pissed about the album cover," Kurt finally said. "Yeah, I'm pissed about the album cover." Kurt nodded slowly. "I get it. If it was my kid, I'd probably be pissed too." "My son's penis is on an album that's sold 6 million copies," Rick said, his voice rising despite his attempt to stay calm. "Do you understand what that means? Do you have any idea what that's going to be like for him when he gets older? Every kid at school is going to know what he looked like naked as a baby. That image is going to follow him his entire life." Kurt listened without interrupting. When Rick finished, he was quiet for a moment. "You're right," Kurt said finally. "That image is going to follow him his entire life. I'm not going to sit here and tell you it won't, because it will. But I want you to understand something about that image and why we chose it." "I don't care why you chose it," Rick said. "You should have thought about the consequences." "We did think about the consequences," Kurt said, his voice sharper now. "We thought about what we were trying to say. That album cover isn't about your son. It's about corruption. It's about innocence being lured by money. It's about capitalism and greed and the way the world tries to turn pure things into commodities." "And you decided to make that statement using my son?" "Yeah, we did. Because art requires images, and sometimes those images involve real people. Your son was a baby swimming in water. We didn't sexualize him. We didn't exploit him. We used his image to say something about the world we live in." Rick stood up, angry now. "You used my son without my permission." "You gave permission," Kurt said calmly. "You signed a release form. I didn't know it would be used like this." "What did you think it would be used for?" Rick opened his mouth, then closed it. He hadn't thought about it. He'd taken the money and signed the form and not asked questions because $200 was $200. Kurt seemed to read his expression. "Look, I'm not trying to be an asshole here. I genuinely understand why you're upset. But you did sign away the rights to that image. And yeah, maybe you didn't know what you were signing away, and maybe that's partially on us for not being more clear. But it's done now. That image exists. It's out in the world. And we can't take it back." "So what am I supposed to do?" Rick asked, his anger deflating into something more like despair. "Just accept that my son is going to be known for this forever?" Kurt leaned forward, his elbows on his knees. "Can I tell you something about being famous?" "What?" "It's not what people think it is. Everyone sees the magazine covers and the sold-out shows and they think it must be amazing. But fame doesn't make you happy. It doesn't make you whole. It just makes you visible. And visibility isn't always a gift. Sometimes it's a burden." "What does that have to do with Spencer?" "Your son is going to be famous for being on that album cover. You're right about that. But famous doesn't mean ruined. It just means people will know who he is. What he does with that, how he responds to it, that's up to him. He can let it define him, or he can define himself despite it." Rick sat back down heavily. "I just wanted to protect him." "I know. And you should keep protecting him. But you also need to understand that this image, weird as it is, it's part of something bigger than any of us. That album is connecting with millions of people. It's giving them something they need, something they can't articulate but can feel, and your son's image is part of that. Is that fair to him? Maybe not. But it's real." They sat in silence for a while. Rick could hear the muffled sound of the opening band playing in the arena. "I brought Spencer tonight," Rick said suddenly. "He's 18 months old now. I don't know what I thought. Maybe I wanted you to see him as a real person and not just a photograph." Kurt's expression changed, softened. "He's here?" "With my wife, in the parking lot. I didn't know if you'd want to meet him." "Yeah," Kurt said immediately. "Yeah, I want to meet him." 10 minutes later, Janet was backstage holding Spencer, who was fussy and rubbing his eyes, clearly past his bedtime. Kurt approached slowly, like he was afraid of spooking them. "Hey, Spencer," Kurt said softly. Spencer looked at him with those wide baby eyes, stuck his fist in his mouth, and made a noise that might have been hello or might have been, I want my bottle. Kurt laughed, and it was the first genuine emotion Rick had seen from him. He's a cute kid. Thank you, Janet said, still visibly uncomfortable with this whole situation. Kurt reached into his pocket and pulled out a Sharpie. He grabbed a piece of paper from a nearby table and wrote something on it, then handed it to Rick. This is my personal number. Not my manager, not my assistant. Me. If Spencer ever needs anything, if he's getting bullied about the album cover, if he has questions about why we used his image, if he just wants to talk, have him call me. I mean that. I'll talk to him. Rick looked at the number, then at Kurt. Why would you do that? Because you're right. This is going to follow him, and the least I can do is be available to help him process it if he needs that. Kurt knelt down so he was at Spencer's eye level. Hey buddy, you're on the cover of my album. Someday when you're older, people are going to talk about that. Some of them will think it's cool. Some of them will think it's weird. But I want you to know something. That image means something. It's art. It's a statement, and you're part of something that's changing music and culture. That's pretty special. Spencer grabbed Kurt's hair and pulled. Kurt winced, but didn't pull away. Yeah, okay. I deserved that. Janet couldn't help but smile a little. Rick felt something in his chest unclench. I'm still not happy about this, Rick said. I know, Kurt said, gently extracting his hair from Spencer's grip. And you don't have to be. But maybe we can find a way to make it less terrible. How? For starters, I'll make sure you get royalties. Not a one-time payment, actual royalties from album sales. It won't undo the exposure, but at least Spencer will have money put away for college or whatever he needs. You don't have to do that. Yeah, I do, because you're right that we used your son's image to make a statement. And we're profiting from that statement. He should benefit too. Over the next year, Kurt kept his word. A trust fund was set up for Spencer with royalties from Nevermind sales. More importantly, Kurt sent occasional letters, checking in, asking how Spencer was doing. Rick never stopped being uncomfortable with the album cover. But his anger at Kurt Cobain faded. He realized that Kurt hadn't been trying to hurt Spencer. He'd been trying to say something about the world. When Kurt died in 1994, Rick felt a profound sadness. He thought about that meeting backstage, about how vulnerable Kurt had seemed, about how he'd knelt down to talk to a baby who'd pulled his hair. Spencer grew up knowing he was the Nevermind baby. It was weird and sometimes uncomfortable, but it also became part of his identity. He recreated the photo on milestone birthdays. He had complicated feelings about it. But he never forgot what his dad told him about meeting Kurt Cobain, about how Kurt had listened, had understood the concern, and had tried to make it right. The album cover became one of the most iconic images in music history. Spencer's swimming baby body became a symbol of a generation, of rebellion, of innocence corrupted by capitalism, of art that challenged conventional boundaries. And somewhere in all of that cultural significance was a simple truth. Spencer Eldon was a real person whose image was used without his full understanding or consent, and Kurt Cobain, for all his artistic vision, recognized the human cost of that decision and tried to make amends. This is the true story of the Nevermind album cover baby, the reluctant icon, and the brief meeting between his father and the artist who made him famous, proving that behind every famous image is a real person with real feelings, and acknowledging that matters.